47 species had gathered to discuss one problem. Humans. The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council floated in orbit around the neutral world of Varys 4. Representatives from every major civilization sat in their designated pods, arranged in a massive circle that stretched half a kilometer wide. Some breathed oxygen. Others floated in liquid tanks. A few existed as pure energy contained in magnetic bottles. But today, despite their differences, they all agreed on one thing. Humanity had to be stopped. High Arbiter Nolan of the Tervasi Collective stood at the central platform. His gray skin reflected the chamber's cold light as he activated the display screens around him. 80 years, he said, his voice translated into 47 languages simultaneously. That is how long humans have possessed faster-than-light travel. In that time, they have spread across 3 star systems. They have built 17 colony worlds. Their population has grown from 8 billion to 32 billion. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. They breed like parasites, growled Admiral Sorvin of the Drathani Empire. His massive frame barely fit in his pod. My species took 400 years to colonize our first system. These creatures have done it in less than 1 generation. It is not just their expansion, added Counselor Mirith, a slender Tervasi female. They refuse to follow established protocols. They settle wherever they please. They make trade agreements without council approval. They act as if the laws of civilization do not apply to them. Nolan nodded gravely. We have sent 17 diplomatic missions requesting compliance. Each time, the humans smile, nod, and continue doing exactly what they were doing before. They mock us, Sorvin said. I say we remind them what galactic power looks like. The chamber erupted in debate. Some species argued for patience. Others demanded immediate action. The Finari delegation suggested economic sanctions. The Varadi hunters offered to handle the problem permanently. After 6 hours of argument, Nolan called for a vote. All in favor of declaring formal war against the human species. 39 lights turned green. 6 remained neutral. 2 turned red. The motion passes, Nolan announced. The Galactic Council officially declares war on humanity. Let it be recorded that we offered them every opportunity for peaceful integration. They chose defiance. The declaration was transmitted across light years of space, bouncing through relay stations until it reached the Sol system. From there, it traveled to Earth, where it arrived at the office of Secretary General Priya Rao. Priya was a small woman with gray hair and kind eyes. She had spent 40 years in diplomacy, and very little surprised her anymore. She opened the transmission and read it aloud to her cabinet. The Galactic Council, representing the unified authority of 47 spacefaring civilizations, hereby declares a state of war against the species known as humanity. Your expansion ends now. Your defiance ends now. Surrender your colony worlds and submit to council governance, or face total annihilation. You have 30 standard days to comply. The room fell silent. Priya looked at her ministers. Defense Minister Samuel Wright was staring at the ceiling. Foreign Minister Yuki Tanaka had her hand over her mouth. Economic Advisor James Peterson was holding his breath. 3 seconds passed. Then Samuel made a sound. It started small, like a cough. Then it grew. His shoulders began shaking. A snort escaped his nose. Yuki lost control next. Her hand couldn't contain the laughter that burst from her lips. Within moments, the entire cabinet was laughing. Loud, uncontrollable, genuine laughter. The kind that made stomachs hurt and eyes water. Priya wiped tears from her cheeks and tried to catch her breath. Oh my. Oh, that's wonderful. They actually did it. They actually declared war on us. Did they really think we would surrender? Samuel gasped between laughs. They called us a problem. Yuki giggled. That's the nicest thing anyone said about us in years. Priya composed herself and sat back in her chair. A smile still played on her lips. Well, we should probably respond. James, what do we have in the cultural archive? James pulled up his tablet, still chuckling. What kind of response were you thinking? Something appropriate. Something that captures the spirit of the moment. 10 minutes later, the official human response was transmitted back through the same relay network. It reached the Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council during their post-vote celebration. High Arbiter Nolan opened the transmission expecting demands, threats, or perhaps a desperate plea for mercy. Instead, he found a single image. It showed a small orange earth animal with pointed ears and whiskers. The creature appeared to be smiling. Below it, text read, "Good luck with that." Nolan stared at the image for a long time. "What does this mean?" he finally asked. No one in the chamber could answer. Admiral Sorvin leaned forward in his pod. "Is this a code? Some kind of hidden message? Perhaps a threat disguised as humor?" Counselor Mirith suggested. "I want a full analysis," Nolan ordered. "Every symbol, every pixel. There must be something we are missing." 3 days later, the Council's best cryptographers delivered their report. There was no hidden message, no secret code, no deeper meaning. The humans had simply sent them a picture of a cat, and somehow, that was more terrifying than any weapon humanity could have built. The memes spread faster than the war declaration itself. Within hours of humanity's response, the galactic network was flooded with images, videos, and jokes about the Council's decision. Human comedians performed special shows about it. News anchors struggled to report the story without laughing. Someone created a line of t-shirts that read, "Survive the Galactic Council War of 2347," and sold 3 million units in the first day. But on the colony world of New Adelaide, residents organized what they called a war declaration party. They served drinks with names like Council Tears and Alien Invasion Punch. Children ran around wearing cardboard armor, pretending to be scary aliens. Adults danced under colored lights and placed bets on how long the whole thing would last. Nobody was scared. Nobody was preparing for battle. Nobody seemed to care at all. This confused the Galactic Council more than anything else. "They are treating this as entertainment," Counselor Mirith reported to High Arbiter Nolan. "Their entire species appears to view our declaration as a joke." "Perhaps they do not understand the threat," Nolan suggested. "I have reviewed their communications. They understand perfectly. They simply find it amusing." Admiral Sorvin had seen enough. Words mean nothing to these creatures. Action will teach them respect. He turned to address the Council. "I request permission to deploy the Drethani Third Fleet. 200 warships should be sufficient to demonstrate our resolve." Permission was granted within the hour. Sorvin's fleet launched from Drethani space and began the 2-week journey toward human territory. Each ship carried enough firepower to level a city. The Admiral had personally overseen 100 successful campaigns. This, he believed, would be his easiest victory yet. Meanwhile, the humans continued their party. Counselor Mirith attempted direct communication with humanity's government. She was connected after a brief wait to Deputy Minister David Okonkwo. David appeared on her screen mid-bite, holding what looked like some kind of food between 2 pieces of bread. He held up one finger, chewed slowly, and swallowed. "Sorry about that," he said cheerfully. "Lunch. How can I help you?" Mirith composed herself. "I am Counselor Mirith of the Tervasi Collective. I wish to discuss the Council's declaration of war." "Oh, that thing. Yeah, we got it. Funny stuff." "This is not a matter for humor, Deputy Minister. The Drethani Third Fleet is currently en route to your borders. 200 warships." David nodded slowly. "Okay, cool." Mirith blinked. "Cool. Yeah, sounds good. Thanks for the heads up." He took another bite of his sandwich. "Do you not understand what this means? You are facing military invasion." David wiped his mouth with a napkin. "I mean, sure. But what do you want me to do about it? Get stressed? That sounds exhausting. You should be preparing defenses, mobilizing your military, evacuating civilians. That also sounds exhausting." David leaned back in his chair. "Look, Counselor, I appreciate the warning. Really. But we're not going to fight you. Then you will surrender." "No." Mirith's translator struggled with her confusion. "If you will not fight and will not surrender, what will you do?" David shrugged. "Probably invite them to the barbecue." The transmission ended. Mirith sat in silence for several minutes, trying to process what had just happened. 2 weeks later, the Drethani Third Fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of human-controlled territory. Admiral Sorvin stood on his command deck, ready to deliver the opening threat that would bring humanity to its knees. Then his tactical officer made a strange sound. "Admiral," the officer said slowly, "you should see this." Sorvin looked at the display. His 4 eyes widened. Thousands of ships surrounded his fleet. Not warships, not military vessels of any kind. They were civilian craft. Cargo haulers, passenger transports, personal yachts, mining vessels. Some were so old they looked ready to fall apart. Others were clearly homemade, and every single one of them was broadcasting music. What is this noise? Sorvin demanded. It appears to be human music, Admiral. Multiple genres. They are also transmitting greetings in over 200 languages. A small shuttle broke from the crowd and approached the flagship. Its pilot requested docking permission. It is unarmed, the tactical officer confirmed. 3 life signs aboard. Sorvin should have refused. Every protocol demanded he refuse. But something about this situation had broken his understanding of how war was supposed to work. Let them dock, he heard himself say. Minutes later, 3 humans walked onto his command deck. A middle-aged woman with dark curly hair. A man about the same age with a wide smile. And a young girl, perhaps 12 years old, carrying a large decorated box. Hi there, the woman said brightly. I'm Rosa. This is my husband Miguel and our daughter Anna. We're your official welcoming committee. Sorvin towered over them. His species was built for war, with thick scales and natural armor. He had killed enemies with his bare hands. The little girl walked right up to him and held out the box. We made you a cake, Anna said. It's shaped like your ship. Mom said you traveled really far, so you're probably hungry. Sorvin looked down at the cake. It was indeed shaped like his flagship. The words, "Welcome to the neighborhood," were written across it in perfect Drithani script. For the first time in his long military career, Admiral Sorvin had absolutely no idea what to do. Rosa explained the bouncy castle 3 times before Sorvin admitted he still did not understand. It's a big inflatable structure, she said patiently. Children jump on it. Adults too, sometimes. It's fun. The Admiral stared at her. You have brought your fleet to a military confrontation to discuss inflatable structures? We brought food, games, and good vibes. The bouncy castle is just one part of the festival. Rosa pulled out a small device and showed him images. See? There's also face painting, live music, and Miguel's famous pulled pork. My secret is the slow cook, Miguel added proudly. 12 hours minimum. Falls apart in your mouth. Sorvin looked between the 3 humans, then at his tactical display showing 4,000 civilian ships, then back at the cake his officers were now examining with scientific instruments. Is this a trap? He asked. Miguel laughed. Only trap here is Rosa's cooking. Once you try it, you'll never want to leave. We've invited your whole fleet to New Adelaide, Rosa continued. The festival starts tomorrow. Shore leave for anyone who wants it. No weapons required, just empty stomachs and open minds. The Admiral had trained his entire life for warfare. He had studied tactics, strategy, and the art of destruction. Nothing in his education had prepared him for a family offering him cake and party invitations. I must consult with my superiors, he said finally. Take your time. Rosa beamed. We'll be right outside. Anna, give the Admiral our contact frequency. The little girl handed Sorvin a small card with a drawing of a flower on it. I drew that myself, she said. The flower, I mean, not the numbers. Then the 3 humans left, waving goodbye as if they had just visited a friend rather than boarded an enemy warship. Sorvin immediately contacted High Arbiter Nolan. What is the meaning of this? Nolan demanded when he heard the report. They brought a child onto your flagship? She gave me a cake, Arbiter, shaped like my ship. And you accepted it? Sorvin paused. I did not know how to refuse. Nolan rubbed his temples. This is precisely the kind of psychological manipulation we feared. They are attempting to confuse you, Admiral. Do not fall for their tricks. With respect, Arbiter, I have seen many tricks in my career. This does not feel like manipulation. These humans genuinely seem to want us to attend their party. That is exactly what they want you to think. But doubt had already taken root in Sorvin's mind. The next day, 47 Drithani officers accepted shore leave invitations. Sorvin authorized it as a reconnaissance mission to study human behavior up close. The officers departed in civilian clothing, as requested by their hosts. They returned 3 days later wearing bright-colored shirts covered in flower patterns. Several had learned human card games. One had gotten a temporary tattoo of an earth creature called a dolphin. Another had discovered something called ice cream and demanded the Drithani Empire invest in its production immediately. They call these Hawaiian shirts, Lieutenant Commander Drex explained, modeling his new outfit for the Admiral. Apparently, Hawaii was a region on Earth known for relaxation and hospitality. The humans say wearing these shirts helps you feel at ease. You were supposed to be gathering intelligence, Sorvin said flatly. I did, Admiral. The humans have a game called poker. It involves deception and probability. I learned much about their psychological patterns. Drex smiled, which was unusual for Drithani. Also, I made friends. There is a human named Miguel who taught me to make something called guacamole. Sorvin dismissed his officers and sat alone on his command deck. His fleet had been in human space for 2 weeks. They had not fired a single shot. They had not made a single threat. And somehow, his soldiers were returning happier than they had been in years. That he looked at the card Anna had given him. The flower drawing was simple but colorful. Below the contact frequency, she had written, "Call us if you need anything." Against every instinct he possessed, Sorvin opened a channel. Rosa answered immediately. "Admiral, how did you like the cake?" "It was acceptable. Miguel made it from scratch. Old family recipe." "So, are you coming to the festival?" Sorvin hesitated. "I am the commander of an invasion fleet. And we are technically at war." "Sure, technically. But that doesn't mean we can't be friendly." Rosa's smile was warm and genuine. "Look, Admiral, I don't know much about galactic politics. But I know that people who share food usually stop wanting to hurt each other. Why don't you come down yourself? See what we're all about." "That would be highly irregular. Most good things are." Sorvin ended the call and stared at the stars outside his viewport. Somewhere out there, the Galactic Council was waiting for his victory report. He looked at the flower drawing again. Then he ordered his shuttle prepared for departure. A golden retriever named Biscuit changed the course of galactic history. But that comes later. First, the Galactic Council had to deal with its growing crisis. The Drithani Third Fleet had been in human space for a month without firing a single weapon. Admiral Sorvin's reports had become increasingly strange, filled with descriptions of community gatherings and shared meals rather than tactical assessments. High Arbiter Nolan convened an emergency session. "This is unprecedented," he announced to the chamber. "The humans have somehow neutralized 200 warships without military action. They have used hospitality as a weapon." "Impossible," growled the representative from the Verati hunters. His name was Battlemaster Gent, and his species was famous throughout the galaxy for their ruthless efficiency. "The Drithani have simply grown soft. Send us instead. We will not be distracted by parties and cakes." Nolan considered this. The Verati had never failed a mission. They did not negotiate. They did not hesitate. They simply completed their objectives with cold precision. "Very well," Nolan agreed. "The Verati will deploy to human agricultural colony designated Haven's Rest. 50,000 civilians. No military presence. A simple target to demonstrate council authority." Gent bowed his scarred head. "It will be done within the week." The Verati fleet arrived at Haven's Rest 3 days later. They came in fast and aggressive, weapons charged, ready for any resistance. There was none. At Haven's Rest was a farming world covered in rolling green hills and golden wheat fields. Small towns dotted the landscape. Rivers wound through valleys. It looked peaceful. Too peaceful. Gent ordered ground forces to deploy immediately. 500 Verati hunters landed outside the largest settlement. They moved in tactical formation, weapons drawn, scanning for threats. An elderly human walked toward them. He was tall and thin, with white hair and wrinkled skin. He wore simple clothes covered in dirt. His hands were rough from decades of work. He smiled as he approached, showing no fear at all. "Well now," the old man said. "You folks look like you've traveled a long way. I'm George. Welcome to Haven's Rest." Gent raised his weapon. "You are under occupation. Direct us to your leaders." George scratched his chin. "Leaders? We don't really have those. We mostly just take turns organizing things. But I can introduce you to Nancy if you want. She's running the Harvest Festival this year. This is not a social call. We are here to establish council authority." Sure. But you must be hungry after your trip, right? My wife just finished baking bread. Fresh from the oven. Best you'll ever taste." Gent stared at the old farmer. "You do not understand the situation. We are Verati hunters. We have conquered 100 worlds." "That sounds exhausting," George said sympathetically. "All that traveling, all that fighting. Don't you ever just want to sit down and enjoy a quiet meal?" A young Verati soldier nearby lowered his weapon slightly. George noticed and turned to him. "What's your name, son?" The soldier glanced at Gent, then answered quietly. "Ren. Nice to meet you, Ren. You look strong. We could use some help carrying grain sacks later if you're interested. Honest work. Gets the blood moving." George reached into his pocket and pulled out something red. Here, have an apple. Grew it myself. Ren took the apple. He bit into it cautiously. His eyes widened. This is very good, he admitted. Homegrown, George said proudly. Nothing beats food from your own land. Gin had seen enough. Search the settlement. Find their weapons. Their communications. Whatever they are hiding. His soldiers spread out through the town. They searched homes, barns, and storage buildings. They found vegetables, preserved meats, handmade furniture, and countless jars of jam. They found children's toys and family photographs. They found an entire room dedicated to something called quilting. They did not find a single weapon. One squad reported discovering a structure filled with suspicious animals. Investigation revealed it was a dog shelter where humans kept elderly dogs that had no families. The lead dog, a golden retriever named Biscuit, immediately approached the Varadi soldiers and began licking their faces. "What is this creature doing?" a soldier asked, clearly uncomfortable. "He likes you," explained the shelter keeper, a young woman named Carol. "Dogs can sense good people. Biscuit doesn't greet just anyone like that." The soldier looked down at Biscuit, who was now leaning against his leg and wagging his tail so hard his whole body shook. Something strange happened in that moment. Something the soldier had never felt before. He crouched down and gently patted Biscuit's head. That evening, the Varadi hunters found themselves seated at long wooden tables in the town square. George and his neighbors had insisted on feeding them. Roasted vegetables, fresh bread, grilled fish from the river, and pies for dessert. Battlemaster Gint sat at the head of one table, a plate of food in front of him that he had not touched. George sat beside him. "You know," George said quietly, "my grandfather came here 60 years ago, built our farm with his own hands, raised a family, lived a good life." He looked out at the fields glowing orange in the sunset. "All any of us really want is a quiet place to grow things and share meals with good company." Gint said nothing. "You seem tired," George continued. "Not just from traveling. Tired in your soul. How long have you been fighting?" The battlemaster finally spoke. "My entire life." George nodded slowly. "That's too long." He pushed the plate closer to Gint. "Eat. Rest. Nothing bad is going to happen here tonight. I promise." Gint looked at the farmer, then at the food, then at his soldiers, many of whom were already eating and laughing with the humans. Slowly, he picked up his fork. The bread really was the best he had ever tasted. 6 months into the war, the only casualties were dietary restrictions. 12 Drathani soldiers had discovered they were lactose intolerant after trying human ice cream. 3 Varadi hunters had developed mild allergies to earth pollen. And 1 council observer had eaten too many spicy peppers and spent 2 days in medical care. No shots had been fired. No territories had changed hands. No battles had occurred. Instead, alien soldiers were defecting, not to the human military. There was no human military to defect to. They were defecting to human colonies, requesting permanent residency, citing what they called quality of life improvements. Former Drathani Lieutenant Drex now ran a small restaurant on New Adelaide. He served fusion cuisine combining Earth and Drathani flavors. His specialty was guacamole with Drathani fire peppers. He had a waiting list 3 months long. Several Varadi hunters had settled on Haven's Rest. They helped with the harvest during busy seasons and spent the rest of their time learning woodworking from local craftsmen. Biscuit the Golden Retriever had become the unofficial mascot of their group. The Galactic Council was in crisis. High Arbiter Nolan decided to take matters into his own hands. He traveled personally to Earth to demand answers from humanity's leadership. Secretary General Priya Rao received him in her private garden behind the governmental complex. It was a small space filled with flowers, fruit trees, and comfortable chairs. A pot of tea sat on a wooden table between them. Nolan remained standing. His tall gray form loomed over the small human woman. "I demand to know your strategy," he said coldly. "What game are you playing? What is your ultimate objective?" Priya poured 2 cups of tea. "Please sit down, Arbiter. You must be tired from your journey. I did not come here for refreshments." "No, but you're getting them anyway. Sit, please." Something in her tone made him obey. Nolan lowered himself into one of the chairs. It was surprisingly comfortable. "Now," Priya said, handing him a cup, "what would you like to know?" "Everything. Your military strength, your hidden weapons, your plan to defeat the Council." Priya sipped her tea. "We don't have hidden weapons, Arbiter." And we don't have a plan to defeat anyone. Impossible. No species survives without military power. We have a military, a small one, mostly for search and rescue operations and dealing with space debris. She smiled. We just choose not to use it for conquest. Nolan leaned forward. Then why are you winning? Are we winning? I thought we were just being friendly. Your friendliness is destroying my coalition. The Drethani fleet has effectively abandoned its mission. The Vorati are writing poetry about farming. 6 species have withdrawn their support for the war entirely. Priya set down her cup. Her expression grew serious but remained kind. Arbiter Nolan, let me tell you something about humans. We figured something out a long time ago, back when we were still killing each other over patches of dirt on one tiny planet. She paused. It's easier to make friends than enemies. That is naive, is it? Look at your coalition. 47 species held together by fear and mutual distrust. How often do you actually trust each other? How often do you celebrate together? Share meals? Tell jokes? Nolan said nothing. When our soldiers saw the Drethani fleet, they didn't see enemies. They saw people who had traveled very far from home and probably missed good food. When they met the Vorati, they saw warriors who had been fighting so long they had forgotten what peace felt like. Priya leaned back. So we fed them. We talked to them. We showed them what life could be like without constant war. You cannot solve everything with kindness. No, we can't. But we can solve more than you might think. She picked up a small plate from the table. Cookie. Nolan stared at the offered food. It was brown with small dark spots. What is this? Chocolate chip cookie. Old Earth recipe. My grandmother used to make them. I did not come here for cookies. Arbiter, when was the last time someone offered you something simply because they wanted you to enjoy it? No political motive. No hidden agenda. Just, here, have this, because it tastes good and I want to share. Nolan realized he could not remember. His species, the Trevesi, had abandoned such gestures generations ago. Everything had become transactional, efficient, cold. They had built a great civilization, but somewhere along the way, they had stopped doing things simply for the joy of doing them. He took the cookie. It was sweet and warm. The chocolate melted on his tongue. Such a simple thing, such a small pleasure. But in that moment, something inside him began to crack. Tell me about these parties your people throw, he said quietly. I have read reports, but I do not understand them. Why do humans celebrate so often? Priya smiled. Would you like to find out? There's a birthday party happening tomorrow. My aide's daughter is turning 7. There will be cake, games, and something called a bouncy castle. Nolan remembered Admiral Sorvin's confused reports about inflatable structures. I believe I would like that, he heard himself say. And so the High Arbiter of the Galactic Council spent the next day at a child's birthday party. He wore a paper crown. He ate too much cake. He watched children laugh and play and chase each other through the grass. When a small girl asked him to help blow out the candles, he realized he was smiling. He had not smiled in 40 years. 1 year after declaring war, the Galactic Council met again to admit defeat, but it did not feel like defeat. Not really. The Grand Chamber looked different now. Human observers had been invited for the first time in Council history. They sat in a section near the central platform, and they had brought snacks. Baskets of cookies, fruits, and something called trail mix were being passed around to any delegate who wanted some. Several did. High Arbiter Nolan stood at the center, preparing to address the assembly. He looked older than he had a year ago, but there was something softer in his eyes, something that had not been there before. Honored delegates, he began, we gather today to discuss the war against humanity. But before we proceed, I must share something personal. The chamber fell silent. 1 year ago, I declared this war because I was afraid. We were all afraid. Humanity expanded too fast. They ignored our rules. They acted like nothing could stop them. He paused. And we were right to notice these things. But we were wrong about what they meant. Nolan activated the display screens. Images appeared showing Drethani soldiers eating dinner with human families. Vorati hunters learning to fish in quiet rivers. Council diplomats attending human weddings and funerals and festivals. I spent 3 months on Earth, Nolan continued. I attended birthday parties. I went to something called a game night. I watched humans argue about whose team was better and then hug each other afterward. His voice grew quiet. I learned that humans laugh because they know life is short. They laugh because taking everything seriously is exhausting. They laugh because sometimes the only sane response to an absurd universe is joy. Admiral Sorvin rose from his seat. Around his wrist was a small bracelet made of colored string. Anna had made it for him. He had not removed it since. The Drithani Empire formally withdraws from this war, he announced. We have found no enemy among the humans. Only friends we did not know we needed. Murmurs spread through the chamber. Battlemaster Gent stood next. He looked strange in his formal uniform now, like it no longer fit the person he had become. The Varadi hunters also withdraw. My soldiers have discovered something on human worlds that we never found in Conquest. He paused, searching for the right words. Peace. Simple, quiet peace. We do not wish to fight it. One by one, species withdrew their support. The Fenari, the Tervasi minority who had voted against war from the beginning. Even some who had been strongest in their hatred now admitted they had been wrong. When the votes were counted, not a single species remained committed to the war. Secretary General Priya Rao was invited to address the council. She walked to the central platform, a small woman surrounded by giants, and she did not seem afraid at all. Thank you for this opportunity, she said. I know many of you still have questions. You want to understand how this happened, how we turned your invasion into a year-long dinner party. Scattered laughter echoed through the chamber. The truth is simple. We never wanted to conquer the galaxy. We never wanted to dominate anyone. We just wanted to meet everyone in it. Maybe argue about whose music is better. Maybe teach you all how to make pizza. She looked around at the assembled delegates. Every species in this room has spent centuries building walls, protecting yourselves from each other, competing for resources, fighting wars over pride and territory and fear. She shook her head. We tried that too once. It nearly destroyed us. So we made a choice. We decided that making friends was more important than making enemies. That sharing food mattered more than hoarding wealth. That laughter was better than fear. Priya smiled. You declared war on us. We answered with open doors and full tables. And somehow, against all odds, you decided to stay for dessert. The chamber was silent for a long moment. Then High Arbiter Nolan spoke. The Galactic Council officially rescinds its declaration of war against humanity. In its place, we propose something new. He activated one final display. The first Galactic Friendship Accord. A commitment from all member species to pursue connection over conflict, cooperation over conquest, and to never again make war against a people who offer us cake. The vote was unanimous. What happened next would be studied by historians for centuries. The most powerful civilizations in the galaxy gathered together, not for negotiation or treaty signing, but for a party. Music played. Food was shared. Stories were told. George the farmer taught Battlemaster Gent how to line dance. The old warrior was terrible at it, but he was smiling so wide his face hurt. Rosa and Miguel served food to delegates from 20 different species, adapting recipes on the fly for different biologies. Anna gave Admiral Sorvin another friendship bracelet. This one was blue, his favorite color. He accepted it with grave formality, which made her giggle. And in a quiet corner of the celebration, High Arbiter Nolan sat with Secretary General Priya Rao, sharing a pot of tea and a plate of chocolate chip cookies. I still do not fully understand you, Nolan admitted. Your species makes no logical sense. Priya laughed. We don't make sense to ourselves most of the time. Yet somehow you have changed everything. She took his hand gently. We didn't change anything, Arbiter. We just reminded everyone what they had forgotten. That life is better shared. That strangers are just friends you haven't met. That the universe is too big and too strange to face without someone beside you. Nolan looked out at the celebration. Enemies becoming friends. Walls coming down. Laughter echoing through halls that had known only cold formality for millennia. Perhaps, he said slowly, that is the most powerful weapon of all. Priya smiled and raised her teacup. To friendship, then. Across all the stars. Nolan raised his own cup. To friendship. And the galaxy, finally, began to heal.